Hey everyone, how's it going? Octopus here and welcome back to evercrisis. We're going to be talking about Vincent's new banner that just dropped. He is an ice physical DPS. It is limited, so if you do not OB6 to OB10 this weapon during this banner, you're stuck to waiting for weapon parts, so keep that in mind because that's a very key point to his banner specifically. I know other limited banners are important, but we're talking about a DPS character that's limited. Usually hard to justify these versus characters who bring a lot of utility, like all those Air setups, Bear's tank setup, right? Those things that have more longevity than just a DPS, because DPSs are usually a dime a dozen. They'll always get replaced, they always get power crept, but utility always seems to stick. So let's jump to Vincent's banner. Let's talk about everything. Is this thing worth it? Because again, it is just a DPS weapon, but it brings a little twist to the game that allows it to have more longevity than your regular DPS. So we're going to jump right in, starting with Vincent and his costume. I think the costume looks fantastic, everything, color scheme. The thing is, one, he's just so exposed here. But it doesn't look bad on him at all. I think the worst part of this costume is that this has a split in the back, but in the front it doesn't, and it kind of makes it look like he's wearing a dress or an apron or something. I don't really like that. It's just like an open. It kind of looks like the jacket's on backwards, right? But everything else looks really solid on this color scheme. The gauntlet, the gun looks really good, very vibrant, like bloody crimson red. I like it. Everything about it. Black bandana. I'm more of an OG Vincent costume still in this game. I do like all the different ideas they're giving him, but when they do stuff like this where the front looks like this, I know it's based on Odin, so there's a certain aesthetic to look for. It just looks really weird, this part. But overall, when you're playing with him in the game, it looks really good. So you're not here for the actual costume and talking about how it looks, but I like to add those so when I go back on these videos, it can always be like, oh yeah, that's what that character looked like. So we got a boost attack all allies. This does stack with your R ability one. So if you do get more R abilities in the future with this, you're getting those 10 points in there. But for now, you're getting a 5% increase with plus 10 stat on it. So really good for overall party increasing. And it's also a very unique one that we don't have. So it's nice to have it on the costume because it's not anywhere else on his kit. Then we have Crimson Hue of the Worthy. So this is going to add ice ability damage 30%. And on top of it, attack stance command gauge is going to go physical ability plus 20%. So this is an Arcanum and a Mastery costume put into one minus 5%. Really, really strong. So him being a physical ice DPS right now with a 50% increase in damage is kind of ridiculously strong, right? Whenever we compare it in Arcanum to a Mastery costume, we're always like, I would never go for the Mastery costume. I'd go for the Arcanum. That's a 15% increase. Well, this is a 15% increase from Arcanum, 35% to 50%. The only difference here is that ice ability damage will apply to everything, including the summon, because the summon will take ice damage into consideration, but attack stance command gauge is only for when you're using those abilities, right? So your C ability off of your main weapon is the main one there. It'll get 20% as long as that attack gauge is full. So really good in that sense, but your summon does lack that 20% difference. Another thing to put in consideration is that attack stance command gauge 20% is physical ability damage. So if you want to use him for physical, he can be used for any physical. So let's say you didn't get his fire Arcanum, technically you can still use this on his fire setup because it is going to increase damage by 20%. Again, it won't affect Ifrit because it's not an element, but your what was it, Holiday Graham fire weapon will get a 20% increase in boost. So that's nice to have there as well. So it's not just a dedicated ice Arcanum setup. But when it comes to him as an ice DPS, huge. Now, Gun of the Worthy, I'm going to go straight into the OB10 because I do want to explain that at base value, take away everything else about his kit with this new ice weakness, he is the strongest physical ice DPS that we have in the game. At 1,120% physical ice damage to a single enemy with no condition. Now, that's not really a big deal because other weapons that have like, oh, does 930% potency times 1.2, 1.3. If the enemy's debuffed, the enemy's always going to be debuffed. Let's be realistic here. Defense down, attack down, elemental resistance down. There's always going to be some sort of debuff on there. Even poison. Actually, I don't know if poison counts, but there is going to be a debuff on there. So other weapons do hit 1,128% after the multiplier, like Yuffie's. So it's not like this is the next potency, but it is the highest potency that we have in the game when it comes to no condition at all. So super strong, no matter if you pick it up for its 50% ability here or not. This is still an Arcanum high potency ice elemental weapon. And it comes with that boost physical attack all allies at 46 points, which is really strong, even as a back weapon for other characters, and a triangle sigil with ice potency 39. Pretty standard for these limited banner weapons. So that being said, when you're pulling for this, it is a limited DPS weapon, meaning that you can't just OB10 it from wishlisting, so you have to OB10 it now for this kind of power. At OB6, it's 930, and we have other physical ice DPS that do this, right? Tifa's pretty close to this as well, so it's not like it's super unique in that aspect that this is the only one you can get. What makes this weapon unique is the 50% ice weakness to any enemy that is not already weak to ice or resist ice. So if the enemy resists ice like Astro Giant or Guild Battle, I believe Bahamut was also resistant to all elements, stuff like that where you can't apply it, it's just a normal DPS weapon, and that still makes it very strong. But this is going to make your non-elemental fights incredibly different than using a crit build or another element build. And I'm going to explain that more. And that's why OB10 and OB6 should be the only two things you're considering here. OB1 or just one copy is good because Vincent is still a debuffer, so he can come into the party, lower physical attack, magic attack, right? He does those extra things, and then you do this and you allow your other DPS to do all the damage. So if you had a really strong Yuffie, you really strong Tifa, Cloud, right? Your other DPSs are ice. He can come in here with a healer or Sid, depending on how fast and how much heals you need in a fight, and then just make it that he lowers the enemy's physical attack while also giving that enemy weakness to ice, so your ice DPS just goes nuts on them, right? So one copy can be used, but the thing with one copy, it's only 30%, and it's a 70% duration. Sorry, 70 seconds, which is a minute and 10 seconds. So one copy is kind of hard to justify here, right? So this is that kind of weapon where you got to go deep, and unless you're a huge Vincent fan or you really need an ice physical DPS, it's kind of one of those weapons you can skip, right? But when you do get this weapon, it's going to make the world of a difference when it comes to those non-elemental fights. And especially for any content, as long as the enemy doesn't resist ice, you're going to be able to bring an ice team into any content for 50% damage instead of your regular 100% damage that you get from your normal weaknesses. So if an enemy is weak to fire, you bring in a fire team. That fire team's doing 100% more damage with their fire attacks. Where if you brought this into a firefight and you put the ice down, you're only getting 50% bonus, but it's still better than nothing. So if you didn't have a fire setup, you could bring this in and possibly pass that quest, right? Especially when you have a certain team that I'm going to talk about later. So with that being said, let's talk about the ice weakness down. This is just going to be a status ailment. So it applies ailment, which means you can't buff, debuff duration up. Whatever duration it says here, that's the duration period, right? So at OB6, it's 100 seconds. At OB10, it's 150 seconds. That is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. This is really important because Vincent has always been that target of doing battle ranking, dungeon rankings, guild battles, right? This is the right time for guild battles. So I know in longer fights like the critical events and stuff like that, the really, really hard content, you're not going to really go in there and be like, well, I'm going to use this because it's only for the first use, right? So everything else that's quick, dungeon ranking, battle rankings, guild battles, where you're in a fight for not more than like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, this is going to be very powerful because he can just annihilate whatever he wants with an ice team. But for everything else that's super long, that 2 minutes and a half isn't enough. So keep that in mind that it's not going to be used for every single part of the content. That'd be a little too broken, but it is going to be used for a lot of the important ranking stuff. So it is one of those weapons to be like, ooh, yeah, I kind of need this if I want to do really good, especially in non-elemental situations. So at OB6, still 930% is really strong, and adding 50% to any enemy really strong. But the real magic comes from, it also increases limit gauge at 5%. But the real magic comes from is when, again, you're facing a non-elemental fight. And with an example here from Abood, they uploaded a video of their ice run against the non-elemental Cactuar, and you can see the crazy amount of damage. But the idea here is that Vincent with Sid, along with Yuffie is a stupid strong team, but Sid and Vincent together is very ridiculous. So if you got Sid's limited weapon, you're probably laughing right now with that enfeeble and ice resist down while he's also doing ice damage. So it is a really strong combo, these two together. But when you don't need a healer and you throw in Yuffie in there with the exploit, so I was talking about earlier, you can only lower physical defense or magic defense on an enemy and buff yourself with physical attack or magic attack. Now that the Cactuar or any enemy that's non-elemental is weak to ice, you can see it's an ailment, and enfeebled does not affect it because it's not a tier buff, right? But with that being added, you now can add ice resist down. You now can add ice attack up. You can add exploit. So you're not only triggering a new buff and a new debuff, you're also adding everyone's exploit to this fight, because now they have double buffs on top of that. So it just, again, ice potency along with your regular standard attack buffs from just being attack, magic, stance, or whatever it is. But everything is just completely amped in these non-elemental fights, and that's what makes Vincent a limited weapon. Not because it's ice potency 1120, right? It's that moments like this, these non-elemental fights, crit builds are pretty much dead at that point because of how much potency and exploits you can now add to this fight. And I'll show you in game the high score where you can see the top ranking people. They've hit 100 million on this Cactuar. But Vincent is now fully buffed. He's got physical attack up 3 tiers, ice damage up 3 tiers. Enemies got 3 tiers of physical defense and ice resist, and that's enfeebled, so that's a 4-tier debuff actually. And Vincent's about to do his attack with the new overspeed. I don't know what level theirs is, but watch this Vincent just go nuts mode. So scores at 241 million right now. Vincent claps 5,561,000 damage on an enemy that wasn't weak to ice. That is crazy how much damage they're actually doing. Yuffie clapping in there as well with 3,442,000. So a ridiculous amount of power you can get into this new system of overspeeding and everything. And then on top of it, the summon, right? Icy Judgment's going to go through. Icy Judgment doing 5 million damage naturally on itself. And then we're going to go here with Diamond Dust from Vincent, clapping 10,477,753 damage from one hit. So really crazy what you can do with this setup. Like I was saying, that at first glance, you're like, this is just a DPS character. But once you throw that into non-elemental fights, it gets very, very insane. So here's the max damage challenge. If you go into the rankings, the top best fights, first place on non-elemental, the Cactuar works a little different because the Cactuar already feels like it has a debuff multiplier on it. Even though the Cactuar doesn't say it's weak to ice, I feel like its elemental weakness is still there. So you can bring in non-elemental fights. So when you use Vincent in his actual place where he's supposed to be, you can see here top ranking, the top score is only 68 million, and the exact same team over here is hitting 107 million. So the Cactuar and these fights don't really count towards showing what Vincent can really do against your regular events and criticals and high score challenges and battle rankings. It's going to be different because this Cactuar feels like it's taking more damage than it's supposed to. I don't know if that's intended or because it has a hidden multiplier for elements in it, and then this one is adding another multiplier on top of it from Vincent's weapon. But 107 million. You can see that Vincent is now in the top rankings. Vincent has been a top ranking DPS for every element that he is part of, and that is no different on this new ice one. So if you look at all the top rankings, the only one that's different is the fire one. The fire Vincent isn't up here with the rest of the teams you can see here, but everything else Vincent pretty much dominated in his category. Right, he doesn't have a water weapon right now, so doesn't really count. And now he's dominating non-elemental because of this new weapon. So it's not only just an ice dominating weapon, it's also a non-elemental dominating weapon because of how much it affects the entire team. So that's what makes Vincent a character in a limited banner as a DPS. This is why he's so unique in that aspect. I'm going to move my webcam over here just so I can show you guys a wish list for you. If you want a wish list, his offhand is going to be T03 model. His weapon for ice damage and physical attack up is going to be Glenn's weapon. Or you can do Lucia's Bald Eagle over here. This weapon right here, Bald Eagle. Or you can also use Zach's Pressure Ridge, I believe it's called, which is also an ice weapon that gives you 62 boost attack. I know you can't see it behind me. 62 boost attack and 39 ice potency. So all three of those weapons do the same exact thing. Glenn is the best one because it has 679, but all of them have over 600 attack. That's just for the min-maxing, right? Not for the R abilities. Just for R abilities, more important. Then enemy launcher is going to bring in your boost attack that you're missing and bring in boost physical ability potency. You can also use automatic for the situations where an enemy gives you dread and you can't get the attack gauge all the way up. You use Glenn's automatic instead because this automatic gives more boost attack by 3%. Instead of having 7 from Emily launcher, you're going to get 10% from automatic because it's at 62 points. But realistically, for the fights that let you increase your attack gauge, you'll get more DPS out of Emily launcher. And then, of course, to top off the rest of the ice potency to make it to 100%, you're going to use Cloud's enhanced sword here, right? For that boost attack, ice potency, because that's the rest of the build that's missing. Now, since Sid is going to be on your team, if you have his limited weapon, I recommend you put Scimitar on there because, again, physical attack is increased, magic attack is increased, but ice damage is also increased mid to high. So that applying that to Vincent's build, you give him the ice damage up, and then he just go nutso mode. So ice resist down from Sid, enfeeble, plus ice potency up for your Vincent. These two were made for each other, but it's a very expensive build because that was limited, and this weapon and costume is also limited. But that's a very good setup that you would want to wishlist if you're pulling for this Vincent. So that is everything about Vincent. Yes, at face value, he's just another DPS, but when you look at these non-elemental fights or letting you cheese any other fight that you wouldn't have that elemental for, Vincent is very top tier. In the end, it's up to you guys. I highly recommend you wait for all 4 weeks to be released. Look at what Angeal does, look at what Tifa does, and then wait till the last day of these banners to really make your decision. But Vincent overall kit is really good, as it usually is, making him still one of the top DPSs in the game. So have fun with them if you're going for him. If not, you're also totally fine. Non-elemental fights, you're still able to complete in this game, even without Vincent. He just makes it easier because he's a new top dog in that category. And that will always be replaced eventually as a DPS. But that new unique ice resist down is kind of unique, so it won't be replaced as fast. Besides all that, thank you so much for watching. Keep on smiling, and I'll smell you later.